The bosses of Wuthering Waves are kind of weird to me. On one hand, I can describe them as fast-paced and possibly looking even cool, but on the other, not very interesting to actually engage with to me. They have this strange, been here, done that aroma to them with each new iteration, including Hecate. I'm not 100% sure if I'm even pronouncing it right, but when it comes to that new hologram, they've got a bunch of drone things they use to shoot at you, and blades they throw at you in addition to their dancing melee attacks. But it doesn't feel very different from me fighting Sentrybot, who's using his wing blades, drill, and miniguns. And he doesn't feel any different from Fallacy, who's using a hammer and fists. That just seemed weird to me. Don't get me wrong, they're solid overall, but they lack that extra oomph to be memorable and interesting. They just kind of have that challenge going for them. But I'm not going to drag that on and just let you know what it feels like these fights are missing for me. And that's having any real depth outside of what is essentially just a core moveset. And on top of that, the bosses aren't really doing anything outside of just attacking. They aren't maneuvering around you to find an opening, they aren't trying to counter you. They're not even reacting to you in any kind of way. And any movement they do end up doing is usually because that's just the animation of their current attack. It's not an actual decision being made to counter you or react to your movements. They're just brainlessly going through their combat rotation, much like you are. Well, you're not brainlessly doing it, you have to dodge. I started thinking of ways they could add a bit more and improve a bit, but then I remembered, oh wait, there's a timer there. And that kind of changes a bit of the dynamic. These fights need to be designed with this short timer in mind. They have to be. And because of that, ensuring this boss is as efficient as possible to defeat has to be top priority while still providing that challenge. After all, it would be frustrating if the boss moved around or did something that made them untargetable for extended periods of time with no counterplay. All the while, that timer is ongoing. Just with that in mind, there's already many of the things you just can't do with bosses now. Because the player isn't just fighting the boss, they're fighting the timer, arguably the actual boss of the fight. Mechanical death can very easily become a detriment rather than a positive to the gameplay experience since everything is now recontextualized under that timer. To properly give examples of what I mean by mechanical death for the rest of this video, I want to bring up another game as kind of a comparison, which is Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, coincidentally based off a gacha game of the same name. It's an action combat game in the same vein as Wuthering Waves, except your party is out on the field all at once, and you don't switch between different characters during fights. The core combat works a bit differently from Wuthering Waves fundamentally, even though it is action combat, so I'm going to be mostly comparing thematically here, don't worry. One of the best fights in the game is Lucilius. He is also the second hardest fight in the game, the hardest being his amped up version, which is a whole new fight on its own. Anyways, here's how that fight starts off right off the rip. He immediately barrages you with an ever-intensifying attack known as Paradise Lost. Positioning, time dodging, guards, and parries. You will immediately find yourself woken up and doing everything in your power to survive. Note the clever use of patterned flashes from the edges of the arena as telegraphs for crossing laser fire AoEs. What's cool about this is how it pressures you. This goes on far longer than you might expect, and as I said, the barrages get faster and faster as it goes on before finally releasing and setting the tone for the rest of the fight. This won't be the only time he does this either. There will be DPS checks throughout where he starts charging up the ability again, but this puts him in a vulnerable state to be stunned easier so you can stop him if you're fast enough. You've already seen that attack, so this adds the pressure of trying to meet that check or face the wrath of Paradise Lost once again, each time more intense and more difficult to survive than the last. There's several more mechanics we can talk about that make this feel like a relentless back and forth against a powerhouse, and that will be before we even get into phase 2, where things ramp up even more. But that's an end of the world tier battle that needs to be insane. So let's lower the stakes a bit with Pied A. Pied A relies on generators and drones to aid him in battle, and occasionally he'll summon those generators to the arena to give himself buffs to his damage and defense and shift himself to a random element after they build up energy. So obviously you need to destroy them to keep that from happening. Only once you get to the last one, he sees what you're up to and immediately pulls that one to buff. He doesn't get the damage and defense up, but he will change his element depending on the color of the generator he pulls. This is how this fight turns into a pick your poison kind of battle. Not only does the element change his moveset, it also changes the effect his attacks have on you. Those drones will have that effect as well. They'll be harassing you throughout the fight, but their attacks are very telegraphed and they're very easy to destroy. You can ignore them, but you also use these drones during bursts to cover more of the battlefield and try to guarantee that what can be a one-shot hit if you're not fast enough. But that change in element also makes it where you can force them into an element your team actually has the advantage over, increasing the damage you deal throughout the fight. Just like with Lucilius, there's a lot more to talk about with this fight, but let's get to the point as to why I brought this up. Admittedly, partly I wanted a reason to talk about this game because I love it so much, but mostly it comes down to how much different these fights are thanks to mechanical death. And these aren't just random mechanics, they're mechanics that accentuate player agency and decision making, all the while taking full advantage of the movement and action combat systems. It also goes as far as to characterize these fights, Lucilius being acting to near godhood and taking every chance simply to smite you out of existence and get this over with efficiently rather than actually fighting you at your own level. And Pilot A being a war machine designed to wipe out entire squadrons with its drones and arena covering attacks. But what happens when we put a 5-minute timer on these battles? That ends up recontextualizing everything. Lucilius Paradise Lost is now a time waster attack. You're trying to stop these not for survival, but to save yourself from losing 20 seconds. Oh, he just did a pushback move. Well, you just lost 5 seconds of uptime. Ugh, did he just jump to the edge of the arena afterwards to sweep a laser at you? Well, there goes another 5 to 10 seconds of uptime. This no longer feels like a challenging and intense battle. It just feels like my time is being artificially wasted based on the RNG behind what move he does. Much like Hecate, where if the RNG is not on your side, she can spam moves that often put you in positions where all you can do is sit back and dodge and make no real progress in the battle. And I think that's why there's no mechanical depth in Wuthering ways to differentiate these battles in the same way, even though I feel there should be. There should be something there to ideally mechanically accentuate the combat system in unique ways per fight, like Granblue Fantasy does with this combat system. I want to reiterate that I'm comparing these games thematically though, not gameplay wise, since a lot of these mechanics in Granblue Fantasy wouldn't really mesh well with Wuthering Waves combat system. That timer very easily stifles the depth and creativity they can probably try and get out of these fights. And let's be real here, they're not really designed to be beaten in 5 minutes. They're more ideally likely designed to be beaten in around 3 to 4, maybe 4.5 by the average participant. You want to have at least some legroom since you can't expect the player to have 100% damage uptime throughout the entire fight, further limiting how much you can really stuff into these engagements. But this could be me just making excuses for the game. The truth is, the timer probably isn't the main reason these fights don't feel great to me, at least not by itself. I think it more so has to do with the solution they seem to have to make sure these fights fit into that timer while being challenging. And that's to simply just have the boss attack. Literally nothing else but just attack, 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 attack. But that by itself isn't bad. That sounds like a boss that's characterized by being super relentless and aggressive. But that's every boss. And even then, the issue comes up that the majority of these attacks are designed to be on target, meant to be time dodged, and time dodging is how you solve almost every attack. When that's every fight, I'm sorry, that starts to feel the same to me, especially since almost all these attacks is just you time dodging. No positioning and very little parryable attacks in the overall boss package for some reason. Actually kind of surprised when there is one. Oh crap, I just parried something. I didn't have to dodge. When Hecate does her spin to win move, I saw this the same way I saw Fallacy spamming his hammer down at me for AoE attacks, which is the same solution to Sentrybot jumping away from me and hailing me with a Gatling fire. Spam time dodge. Which to me doesn't really feel right. It feels like there should be a little bit more to it than that to me. If you took out the laser on one of Hecate's combos and just made it where she punches first and then kicks, that actually wouldn't even change anything. I'd actually dodge the exact same way. Same for her other attacks with her summons, since they're all animated to be part of a combo. Meanwhile, Pilot A's drones, I can use positioning or destroy them on top of dodging, and they also do more than just shoot at you. They complicate the battlefield to ensure hits or proc status debuffs on you. They act independently, and will even provide cover for the boss until it's time for a coordinated strike. Take them out, and the boss loses a lot of its advantages, and the mechanics become simpler to manage. It's why destroying them can be beneficial and makes a difference. They're not just there to be choreographed into a combo and then disappear again. Take them out of Hecate, and all that happens is I press the dodge button less. I would go on about the hologram fights on a more individual level, but I feel like I just wouldn't really be saying much. I'd just be sitting there describing what the attacks look like. The bosses themselves don't really function all that much differently from each other. It's like I'm playing a fighting game online, but there's only one other player who's online, and I keep jumping into them, but they keep showing up as a new character. Only they just keep spamming the attack button on assisted mode over and over again while doing nothing but face tanking my attacks. The fights themselves are tough. Yeah, don't get me wrong, but that's really all they kind of got going for them. And if I'm going to be honest, the only reason why they are tough is because of sudden one-shot attacks that can come from off-screen, or what I like to call knowledge checks, which are attacks that you wouldn't intuitively understand or see coming unless you've already seen the conditions beforehand. Like when Fallacy does his shoulder check and you're far away afterwards, he does 2 hammer swings and then stomps the ground with the shockwave. But if you're close after the shoulder check, he skips the 2 swings and does the exact same stomp animation, but there's a second delayed shockwave after the first. So if you saw the other stomp first, you intuitively dodge this one like you saw him do before. It's the same animation, there's no additional tells. Not expecting, you'll need to do a dodge again for the other half of the wave. Well, now you know for next time. Time to reset, you just got one-shot it. Stuff like that just makes it feel like I'm just kind of playing a memorization game rather than actually understanding and engaging with the boss. Especially since, like I said, they all have the exact same aggressive style. Anyways, the bosses outside of the holograms of 2.0, they're not really any much better. When the holograms are at least not bad, these ones actually are bad. Lorelei has like 3 attacks. 1 big bubble she throws at you, 3 small bubbles she throws at you, and the slash combo. For some reason, she's not utilizing the water beneath for you guys or the stars at the top of the chamber. Maybe she just never did with me and I just have bad RNG with her, but that just seems super odd for me. You could easily characterize her battle with these options. Like if she uses the water to push and pull if your positioning is off, throwing your character off balance. You can time a character switch to get a parry and save that character from getting hit, taking advantage of that character switch system outside of just going through a rotation and rewarding the player for quick thinking and timing. As for the Dragon of Dirge, honestly, I don't even know what this guy does. He kind of just sits there and takes up the ass every time I fight him. But hey, good music. Here, I do want to say this and add on to this. I don't think you need mechanical death, at least not absolutely. It helps, and I think you should still strive for it. It can only, if you do it right, it can only really enhance your combat in ways that aren't really done in other places outside of that boss fight. But it's not a super duper requirement. Okay, I'll say that right there. And there's another way to do it, and I think that they were on the way of doing that with the 1.1 boss design. I thought they were, at least. And that's with an emphasis on character to define the battle. If they just tightened up and improved on a lot of the bosses and ideas they had going on here, I think they would have been on to something I probably wouldn't be saying a lot of what I'm saying here, which is that it feels like I'm fighting the same boss over and over again, just with a new moveset to memorize. One of my favorite fights to this day still is Crownless. That's because he feels like I'm actually fighting something that at least has some cogs turning. Throughout his battle, he's taunting you, weaving through your attacks, or sizing you up and waiting for you to make a move. He attempts to create openings and capitalize on them. If you get too aggressive, he'll attempt to counter. He feels like an actual character making active decisions in the fight and reacting to your moves. Again, not just attack, 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 attack like a freaking robot. And when you get to phase 2, he doesn't just expand his moveset, he changes it in a meaningful way. Now utilizing a weapon, his attacks have extended in both reach and combo length. There is also now parryable attacks that start appearing. And only during this phase does he get a stagger bar. He's also a lot more aggressive, but despite that increased aggression, he's mostly just matching your aggression. If you stop, oftentimes, he'll stop too, and see what your next move is before deciding to make the next action. He's not just spamming the attack button brainlessly. That shift from proactive to reactive behavior then back again throughout the fight does a lot, I feel. Not only am I shifting how I engage with him through the fight, he's shifting how he engages with me throughout the fight, which in turn forces me to shift again. The way I engage might not be completely different from other fights, but that's not what I'm saying is a problem. The way I engage with Lucilius versus Pilot 8 isn't completely different. But because of that characterization of Crownless, there isn't a single fight in the game I can describe like Crownless. No one else does what he's doing here. The 2.0 holograms though, everyone is just relentless, and that's it gameplay wise. They kind of have some character. Hecate is a ballerina, for example, but that's just attack animations. That's not character in how I engage the boss and how the boss engages with me. Changing the animation for the attack and the fight doesn't change, because like I keep saying, the boss isn't doing anything but just attacking. And like I keep saying, that's not a problem by itself, but when I can do that with just about every fight in the game, or at least almost every fight, I start to feel like I'm just going through the motions. Just go through my rotation and dodge differently per boss. At the end of the day, I feel like I can just say the boss is just not for me. It's boring and honestly feel a little tedious and exhausting with just how deceptively straightforward they are to play. Anyways, let me go ahead and just summarize. The issues I have are that the timer is stifling and there's almost no depth in both characterization gameplay wise or in terms of mechanics. These feel like the same fight, different colors. The solutions are, well, bring in that characterization and try putting in some mechanics that challenge and take advantage of the combat system in meaningful and satisfying ways. Like with that example I had with Lorelei. I shouldn't be fighting Hecate the exact same way I'm fighting Sentrybot, and I shouldn't be fighting the Sentrybot the exact same way I'm fighting the teddy bears in the open world. The 2.0 boss fights aren't all bad, they just feel the same and lame because of it. And like I said, I'm willing to accept that maybe they're just not for me. The combat carries them, and honestly, I can't say I'm really looking forward to the next. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.